Welcome to Book Plug, the show where I talk to authors about everything except their latest book. And if they do accidentally plug their book, they'll owe $20 to their favorite charity. And the same rules apply to me. I'm Ben Pitano, the founder of Damn Gravity Media. We tell stories that change the conversation through books, podcasts, and courses. I'm also the author of Great Founders Write, Principles for Clear Thinking, Confident Writing, and Startup Success. Okay, that's my one and only plug for the show. Now let me introduce our guest. In this episode, I had the pleasure to talk to Andrew Warner. Andrew is best known as the founder and host of Mixergy, a podcast where he interviews founders on how they built their businesses. Andrew is also the author of Stop Asking Questions, How to Lead High-Impact Interviews to Learn Anything from Anyone. Damn Gravity happened to publish Andrew's book, so I was really excited to talk with Andrew about everything except the book for a change. So, the rules of the show. If the author plugs their book, they need to donate $20 to their charity of choice. Andrew has chosen Junior Achievement, an organization that provides educational programs to help young people learn about entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and work readiness. Andrew had firsthand experience with Junior Achievement when he was in school, and he credits it with setting up his entrepreneurial path. If Andrew does manage to not plug his book during our conversation, I will donate to Junior Achievement on his behalf. This was a fascinating conversation. We talk about major challenges that Andrew takes on with obsessive focus, from running marathons on all 7 continents to homesteading in Austin, Texas, to most recently learning the guitar. This episode is perfect for anyone who wants to develop a mindset that enables them to do hard things. With all that said, let's get off the rails a bit. Thanks for listening. One thing that I first learned about you right when we started, working on what, was the fact that you are an avid runner, and you're not just an avid runner, right? Let me paint the picture here. So I'm on YouTube. I'm doing some research on you, Andrew, and I come across this video, a 20-minute video, and it's you with just a complete whitescape in the background. I'm like, what is going on? So I start watching the video. And I learned that you in the video, had just run a marathon on Antarctica. And this was actually part of a much bigger campaign that you set up. What was this program? Tell me about your marathon obsession and how it led to this massive, massive endeavor in, I believe it was 2019.
You know what? I said something at the end of that I should have paid more attention to. The goal was to run a marathon on every continent. I had that goal in the back of my head, and it was the kind of thing that I should have been able to do, but I realized that I didn't do it, and I felt so bad for not having done it that I said, okay, you had a goal of running a marathon on every continent. It's not dependent on anyone else, not the economy, not tech, not anything. You should have done it by now. And then I committed to doing it all within 1 year. And the challenge of it was Antarctica. I mean, I was in shape enough that I could run a marathon. My challenge was Antarctica has all these rules about limiting people on the continent because they're trying to preserve it, and they're trying to keep countries from taking it over and have this thing be this pure research experience. And so I spent calls after calls for months trying to find a way on. And then I did find a way there, and then I did run a marathon. It was a solo marathon because I couldn't get into any of the actual formal marathons. I just ran 26.2 miles on my own. And in the video of it, I say, wow, I did it. After so much work to get there, I did it. And then I said, what's next? And I really wish I'd had heeded that. I would have paid more attention to it, because I did notice that it was such an exciting experience for me that everything else just felt like, okay, now what? It's almost like it's almost like now I had no other real reason to live, which sounds dramatic, and it's not what I mean. I have family, I have interests, I have all that stuff, but there wasn't that thing. And I should say, it wasn't just about running a marathon on every continent. It was about seeing the world and having the freedom to go wherever I wanted. It was also about interviewing entrepreneurs on every continent, which I did. And so there's so much wrapped up in that, and it was all wrapped up. And then I did feel emptiness after that.
Interesting. Which is not an uncommon feeling, right?
Right.
You hear people who accomplish big things to be like, that, the result is often surprisingly undramatic. It seems like.
It, wasn't so much undramatic as just I need the next high like that. And that was a challenge. And then, of course, we had COVID lockdowns the following year, and there was less travel. And so I went from lots of travel to none, and that was really difficult.
Yeah.
But I did, since moving to Texas, discover a new thing. I'd always been a runner. I would try different things, and I loved cycling. When I lived in Washington, D.C., I loved rowing. But the thing that I loved about running was your own space, your own time. It's just you and the road, and you're forced to be there by yourself. And when you're by yourself, you either hate it or you force yourself to just get into your own thoughts. And it was really helpful. And then, if you do it, you end up being incredibly healthy. When we got to Austin, I ended up getting land and discovering that there's a lot of work involved in having a property. Like, we had this garden, but by the time we bought it, there were weeds in it. Even though it's a nice garden, it's full of weeds because, we've got the kind of environment where weeds will grow quickly. And so I cleared the whole thing out, and it was so satisfying to do the work, to shovel in and turn the ground over, to get rid of the weeds, to prepare, to build, to all that. Because I wanted to build doors to keep the deer out of the different areas. And that was an equally challenging experience that also was exhausting. And the thing that I discovered was, at the end of that, there was a thing I could look at and say I'd done it. Usually with running, I could look back and see how far I'd run, but it wasn't so tangible afterwards. In fact, every time I got one of those medals that they give you in a formal run, I'd throw it right in the garbage because it's such a meaningless thing. But that also meant I didn't have anything that was tangible at the end of the experience. It was just a memory and a bunch of video clips or photos. But with stuff like this, you get something.
Wait, so you would actually throw away your medals after
Literally
runs?
throw them out in the garbage. There was one time I gave one of them to the kids, and they kind of liked it, but even they go, "What is this?" I threw it in the garbage.
Okay, so you are clearly someone who likes to take on big challenges. Mm-hmm. And you told me earlier that you obsess over things when you find them.
Yes.
Running seems like an obsession of yours.
Interviewing is an obsession.
Seems like an obsession. Interviewing seems like an obsession. You're up over, 2,200 Mixergy
at least,
episodes.
Yep.
Where did all of this start? Have you always been someone who took on massive challenges, or was there like a paradigm shift at some point in your life, or you decided, or you just you stumbled into being this person that took on massive challenges and saw them through?
A lot of my friends in school seem to have been amazing right at the start. Like, I don't know if it was true or not, but I would look at them and I could see that they would be great at playing a new sport that they just discovered. They'd be great at all these things. I wasn't. In fact, they just got better at it. The one thing I noticed was they would often just give up on it, especially once they got good. Then they would get a little bit bored with being good. And I thought, all right, that is someplace where I could excel. If I can't get to be the guy who's good immediately, I can't even get the guy who's going to be great in the intermediate phase. If I could just stick it out longer than they do, then I got something. In fact, I remember going for runs in Central Park when I lived there, and there would be all these runners who were so much faster than me. So what I would do is I would say I'm going to beat them, and because you do these like imaginary races, and I wouldn't beat them, but every once in a while I would see them just sit down exhausted, and then I'd get to pass them because they were done. And I thought, okay, my thing is I'm going to be the person who could just run longer than they do. And if I do, and I make my finish line just not a little, but much further than them, I'll have beaten them by a lot. And I realized that's my skill. I'm not the guy who can come in and be amazing immediately, but I can stick it out longer. And that's much more of a can you tough it out, can you stick it out thing than can you have some natural instinct that you are either born with or not.
So in a world of tortoises versus hares, you realized that at a young age that you were a tortoise.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
That's so interesting. So, okay, going back to Antarctica, was that the hardest marathon you have ever run?
I don't remember my time, but it was definitely the longest of all the marathons. I just wasn't aware of the difficulty of it, so much so that at one point I'd taken off my gloves. Before you even get to Antarctica, there's a team that comes in and sees that you have all the equipment with you. They want to make sure you're protected. People do stupid things like take their glasses off when they're outside, their sunglasses off, and then they get blind. Even if it's temporary blindness, it doesn't go away easily. And so there's a team of people who made sure that I was doing the right thing. When I finished the marathon, they saw that I took my gloves off. I said, yeah, I'm warm. And they took the outer mittens or whatever outer gloves I had, I'd taken them off, but I did have the thin inner ones on. They took it off and checked to make sure that my fingers were still okay. Even though I thought it was okay, they'd known enough to expect that there's a really good chance that I had frostbite and didn't pay attention to it. And so I say that to tell you that it's probably harder than I expected, but I was so elated, so excited to have been on there for every minute that I was there that I didn't notice the difficulty. The one where I noticed the real difficulty, where if I were to point back and say this was hellacious, it was Africa. I was in South Africa, and I didn't know where to run there. And my wife and I were on safari, and the only thing I could do is do these self-guided marathons because my schedule with work and family obligations didn't allow me to go and be whenever there happened to be a marathon at the continent I needed to be on and record interviews and whatever, anyway, wherever it was. So I was there and I finally said, hey, it's beautiful here in safari. I asked one of the people there, can I run a marathon here? They said, no, you can't just run through this. We're protecting these animals, and also these animals will destroy you. I said, but if you go out there, outside this gate, there's a spot where you can go running. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do it right here. And so to be safe, because it was the middle of nowhere and hot, I hired a guy to drive behind me and make sure that I didn't collapse from the heat. But I was stupid. I didn't know any better. There was not a drop of shade. It was the African heat. Even though I got up before the sun, it didn't mean that an hour or two in, the sun wasn't going to pound me, and the sun pounded me. It was absolute agony, not a moment of fun and excitement. I didn't even get to see any animals or any beauty. It was just nothingness and heat. And that was a big, big, big problem. The weird thing was, my wife was there. We celebrated at the end together. Fantastic to have done that together. She left. I had a little bit of time left over in South Africa. And I said, okay, I'm going to go for a run just for my own fun. And I went for a run in Cape Town, and it was beautiful, beautiful environment, beautiful homes, amazing cars. This was like one of the last days. And if I'd have known that was a possibility, that's definitely where I would have preferred to run. I just didn't know any better. And so that was absolute pain.
So, okay, you're running in the middle of the Sahara, not the Sahara, but in the middle of the African wilderness.
It's right outside this safari gate. It was in South Africa, so not as hot as the Sahara, but it was super hot.
So how many times as you were running that, did you just say to yourself, you know what, I don't need to be doing this. I'm not even running it with anybody.
Never.
I can
it doesn't
try
even
this
occur to
again.
me. It doesn't occur to me.
Did at some point you just like learn to switch that little voice off in your head, or is it just never there?
You know what happened was, in the beginning, I would run races. I'd sign up for these Roadrunner Club races, and then I'd sign up for marathons. And I noticed that almost every time the night before a race, I would get a cold. I would be sick. And I would run it anyway. And I eventually, having signed up for so many of these, I realized that if I'm getting a cold every time, there's a pattern here that I'm not picking up on. And it's not that I happen to come into contact with people who have viruses before. It's just, it's me, it's my head, I'm screwing around. And I realized that I have to just shut that out, and that it's coming from worries and like anticipation and problems like that, and it'll go away if I ignore it. And so I just decided I would ignore it. And I'm the kind of person who, even if he has a cold, for the most part, will ignore it. I will, for the most part, just let it go, because I realize that my mind can make me sick before a race. My mind can also keep me from caring about it and make me strong enough to keep going before a race. And that was a big lesson. And I'm kind of obnoxious about it, or my wife thinks I am, where she'll say, you're clearly sick. And I go, I don't think I am. Or I don't even respond, because to respond to it is to give it space in my head. So I go, okay. And I move on, and I try not to engage in any conversations about that.
The wall.
Mm-hmm.
You shared a tweet a while back about the 20-ish mile mark in a marathon.
Yeah.
Tell me what's particularly grueling about the wall. And I'm also curious, like, are there other walls that you've faced? And, so like, I would even describe you as like an endurance person, an athlete, endurance worker, endurance entrepreneur. Are there other walls that you have faced in like other mediums or other challenges besides marathons? But first, like, I'd love to for you to hear you talk about like the wall and what that concept is for runners.
The place where the wall is somewhere around mile 20, where it's just absolute pain and you feel like you can't go on. The place where I felt it the most was the New York City Marathon. I went out for a run and I was like, this is amazing. I'm running a real marathon here with all these people. And I was running faster than I usually do because, you're kind of getting carried away with this group of people. You go over the Verrazano Bridge, and it's like an iconic bridge. They close it off for us so we can go run over it. And it's exciting. And then I grew up in New York, so I'd be in Brooklyn and places where I've forgotten. But once I'm there, I remember them. Go through all these different amazing experiences. And then somewhere around mile 20, it's no longer novel. Somewhere around mile 20, it's actually pain, and you're still 6 miles away from the end. And 6 miles is no joke. If you're in pain and you've got a mile to the end, even that's tough. But 6 miles is real, like, it's a real mental obstacle. And that's the wall. Somewhere around mile 20, people will say, this is too tough. Now, I had one experience where I was going to dump out. It was a half Ironman length triathlon, and it was raining, pouring down, and I was on a bicycle. It was not fun to ride. It was not really a good, healthy ride. And along with a lot of other people, I pulled into the fire department because we just needed a break from the rain. And a lot of people there were just done. They said, it's not safe, it's raining, we're just going to end it. And I remember I called my wife and I said, people are stopping, I'm going to stop. And she said, no, you get back in there. You continue to do this. And I was too embarrassed to tell her no. I said, okay. Maybe in the back of my head, I thought, okay, I'm going to show you that I can't. This is terrible. I'm going to have to be pulled over. But I did it. And the amazing thing is, soon afterwards, the sky just happened to have cleared up. And all I could think about is, as I left, so many people who were staying called me crazy and ridiculous, and just saying that I was making a mistake to go back out into the elements. And I thought, oh, these are people who are also seeing the sun clear up, and they are missing this, and they're kicking themselves, and they're beating themselves up, or they're making mental excuses to justify having dropped out and missing how beautiful it got. And I think that that's the way that I look at a lot of things, that a lot of times people will keep going and then they'll stop just before the real clouds break and things are exciting. And if I could just stick with it, I'm good.
So why did, in this particular instance, your trick of just ignoring your internal voice quit on you? Why did it take an outside voice to encourage you?
I was afraid for safety. Usually, if it's just keep going, it's fine. But on a bicycle in hilly area, slick roads that are getting slicker with every pour of the rain, it just felt like it was going to be agony, and I might get hurt with the cars on the road. Her saying stick with it, I don't think was based on the road conditions. It was, she thought I was giving up just because. Where ordinarily what I would do is just slow down and go. And I thought that slowing down even was not safe where cars couldn't see me. In reality, it ended up being safe. It was fine. And then what happened was I wasn't fast. In fact, she and my kids and my mother-in-law, her mom, were waiting for me at the finish line, and I took so long that they just drove home. And we're talking about miles of going back to San Francisco from the Napa Valley area because they just couldn't wait. But I stuck with it and I finished.
How'd you get home?
I had my own car. I actually had driven
Okay.
out early so that I can start the race, and my kids were young. They
Okay.
couldn't stay the whole day. They just came to see me finish, but they didn't.
Gotcha. I was picturing like, oh, sorry, you're just gonna have to bike all the way home now.
I would have found a way, and she
Yeah.
would have wanted me to find a way. And I am the kind of person who could talk to someone and get it. In fact, before the race, I didn't realize I forgot my goggles, and I couldn't do the swim part without goggles. So I just said, I just yelled out to all the people who were getting ready, I left my goggles at home. I can't believe it. Is there anyone who's got a solution? What could I do? And the person standing right next to me said, I got an extra pair of goggles. Do you want to borrow them? And I borrowed them and I gave back to him.
Okay. Going back to the wall, I still don't understand. So you're just saying like when these really tough things, when these really tough challenges come up, the toughest part of the toughest challenges you could possibly do, when you run into those, you just ignore it. Like how, okay, going back to New York and that wall, you said that was really tough. How did you get through that 20-ish mile mark and make it those last 6 miles?
There's really nothing else you could do. You just go. You just,
Could
I mean,
just
for me,
like
I could
stop. You could walk. You didn't walk.
I guess. I wouldn't have had a hard time walking. But I think what I ended up doing was I know what I care about and I know what I can do. I can't beat you at speed necessarily, but I can just continue and finish. There was one race where I limped the whole way. It was a Vegas marathon. Vegas is incredibly hot. I was so late that they just stopped serving water. In fact, what they did was they left the crew, and this was Vegas heat, the crew left their remaining water bottles on the street, on the ground for us runners who happened to be left behind to get it, which I was appreciative because a lot of times I'll just wrap it up and take it. My problem was I was in such pain with one of my knees that I had to walk. You know how if you're in the gutter, there's like the part of the road that's up a little bit elevated and the other part that's lower? I did that. I put my foot on the asphalt and the other one on the part that was lower because my knee hurt so much, and I just kept walking that way, and I walked it to the finish line. But I knew I could at least walk it to the finish line even if I couldn't race. So basically what I am aware of is this is what I can do. I can always slow it down and finish, and this is what I need to do. Just get to the finish line. I'll also say this, though. In some of my runs, I will sometimes go for runs and not be able to finish. It's been years since I've not been able to finish a run that I set out for, but I'm perfectly fine calling an Uber if I want to. And I have to push myself to be able to do that in the training. Like I was in Argentina and I just went for a run and I said, okay, I want to see if I can go a little bit further. I'm curious what's here. And I just kept running and running. And then at some point I knew I just didn't have it in me to continue and finish. I got a cab and I went home. And my belief is in those experiences that it's okay to push myself beyond where my limit is. And if that's, I have to just keep running and seeing where I go. And if it means I have to cab back home, it's fine. I'm much less inclined to do that for an actual race.
Right. That's interesting. You know, I play ultimate frisbee, and I train all through the off season for this. A couple years ago, I really started weightlifting for speed and endurance and strength. And one of the major hurdles I had to overcome was failing on the squat rack, which can be very scary if you think about it.
Yep.
But all I had to do, it seems so simple, but there was actually two hurdles. One was like the physical hurdle. Like I didn't want to hurt myself, obviously. So all I did was set up the safeties, those two little bars that come off a squat rack. I just set those up a little higher and I would test it. I would know like, okay, if I go all the way down, I can drop this weight and I can just sneak right out, like no problem. But then the other hurdle, which was kind of funny, was the mental one. Like being in a gym, like was I ready and prepared to be a person who failed in public?
Yeah.
But once I did that a couple times, I really saw a turn or change in the trajectory of my training because I knew what my limit was. And I knew I wasn't afraid to push as far as I could to reach that limit.
And I feel like a lot of that comes from just experience. And I think that that's another thing that I believe in, that I'm big on. Can we just keep doing this? The more experience, the more I'll learn just from repetition. You know, you do enough interviews, even if you're not really working hard to improve, you'll naturally start to catch ways that you could do things better. Um, and so I'm big on things that you could do often, and it sounds like that's what happened with you. You've had your realization, but it wasn't like, I don't know. It's through practice, experience, repetition, don't you think?
Yeah. I yeah, finding small daily habits has helped me a lot. Although my mindset starts at a completely different place from you, because I'm constantly fighting this voice in my head, like that's saying like, you don't have to do this, like just like this, you can stop, you can quit. Like even just yesterday, I was having a workout and I had to sit for like 5 or 10 minutes because I was exhausted, but I wanted to do this one extra thing, and the whole time my mind was like, just go home. Like you've already done more than you had to. Like you're good. Like just go upstairs. You're fine. But I just sat there and I sat there and I sat there. And I almost had to trick myself into saying like, okay, you're gonna get up and go home. But it's when I got up, I actually went to like to do my next workout. I have to almost like trick myself sometimes, which is pretty annoying. But and I think I'm getting better at it. But I'm not to the point where like I've just been able to turn that part of my brain off that says like, you don't have to do this or you should quit.
For daily stuff, I still struggle with that. And so I use FocusMate. You introduced me to, what was that service? I'm still a member, and they keep connecting me to you because I signed up because of you.
Flow Club?
Flow Club, yep.
That's funny.
In both situations, you haven't done it?
Not recently.
Every time I'm in there, I'm part of your crew.
Oh, nice.
I will do FocusMate where I get on with someone and it forces me to sit down in my seat and be aware, because I see them and they see me the whole time we're working. I've even done that with my brother using just Google Meet or video chat of some kind. But sometimes someone will come up on FocusMate and do nothing but exercise. Like they're watching me do my work and I'm watching them exercise. And strangely, it's not distracting because I have it off on a different monitor. And it helps. I do find that I don't believe in self-motivation. I mean, I'm clearly a motivated person, but I think that I get a lot more out of doing things with other people. My realization came when I started my first company, and all I had to do was write daily emails, and it was simple emails like a quote a day, a trivia a day, joke a day. And I was doing research, so it wasn't like I was writing the joke. I was finding a good joke that was online and attributing to whoever it got, or I was finding good trivia questions, researching them and writing them in like 3 paragraphs or less. But it would take me all day. I would sit there at my new home office, my new setup. I just left my parents' house, and it was just me. And I couldn't do it. It would take me all day. I had to do it, so I got it by the end of the day. But then I hired my first person. She would occasionally come into my office and work. And when she did, I found that I was flowing faster. There was something about being watched. There was something about not having it just be on me. Same thing for running. I would run, but there was something about having those New York Roadrunner Club's Sunday races that got me to train a little bit more and also show up till the end because there was a race on. And I keep looking for where's that external experience, that external thing with other people that would get me to finish.
I love that. And I agree. Anytime I bring someone else into my work, it just happens so much more quickly. The distractions seem to melt away and I just get it done, which actually is kind of a good jumping off point to your new challenge of working on your property in Austin. So you are a relatively new Austin citizen.
I've never lived outside of a city in my life. I mean, we had kids, and people always said when you have kids, you leave. It's not that hard to have kids in the city. But yeah, it's my first time being outside of the city, though. I wanted that kind of experience.
Yeah. So tell me about the challenges of like actually working the land. I've never done more than like mow my front lawn, when I lived with my parents. What are those challenges, and how do you keep yourself motivated to get those done? Because I assume you're not some sort of part of some sort of like, homesteaders club, although that'd be kind of cool. But
that would be a good idea, actually. That's not a bad idea at all. I'm noticing more and more people want to homestead. They want to create this experience that allows them to live completely on their own, even though they're social and want other people in their lives. So I do have a challenge with it. I've been trying to get someone, for example, to come and mow our lawn here. I will bring these companies in and they'll say, well, you got 5 acres of essentially of lawn here. I can't mow it for you. It's too much. Or they multiply the little bit that they would usually do, which is like a fraction of an acre times 5 acres, and come up with something outrageous like $2,000 every other week because the lawn grows fast.
Yeah.
It's so annoying. I'm still searching. I think the thing I would really like is to just have like a farmhand type of person who could come in once a week and take on responsibilities like just get on the lawnmower and drive all day one time. Anyway. So it's the tough part is that I will take on a challenge and then there'll be something in the middle that makes me stop. And the only thing that keeps me going, I'll whisper so my wife doesn't hear it, is I don't want her to see my half-finished projects, and then I'll be super embarrassed. So I will start a thing, and then I feel obligated to finish it so that she sees it as complete. And then the other thing is, in general, having people over is big. When I lived alone, I realized that I could keep things relatively tidy and clean, and I'd have somebody come in and clean. But if I would have guests over, everything would be super organized. And so I would try to have people over once a week, if not more often. And I know that it doesn't take me that long. But if there's a paranoia of they're coming in, I could do stuff the cleaning people couldn't. Like I could put away all my office papers. Paperwork was a big thing. I could, get stuff done. So again, it comes back again for me to where are the other people? I'm very externally motivated, I guess.
Yeah, I'm laughing because just last week this happened. A friend of mine was visiting. At first, he wasn't going to come over. We were just going to go out for drinks. But then he was, I forget what happened exactly, but I was like, oh, he should come over for dinner, actually. This is a perfect timing. And I told my wife, Mary, and immediately we jumped into cleaning mode. The place looked spotless in 15 minutes where we hadn't touched it in a month. It's amazing what that happened. What happens when... you're going to be on the spotlight.
If I had to think about it, I would say that for all the big things, there's a way to get somebody else to be in the experience to make sure that you get it done. Yeah. And that's helpful. But I don't think we think that way. I think as Americans, we try to think about self-reliance and how can we do this ourselves. And self-reliance is helpful, but can we find a way to have some external pressure too?
It's funny that you bring that up in the same conversation that we're talking about homesteading, but I think you're absolutely right.
I think that homesteading is interesting, but where people feel a little bit more pressure for it is when they have a family or someone else to take care of.
True.
Or that I guess there's some people also who have some kind of anger towards the world and they want to disconnect themselves. But I think most of us are not doing it for Unabomber reasons. I think most of us are doing it because we want to protect our people,
Glad to know where you stand, Andrew.
Yeah.
So actually, this reminds me, I could tell you are locked in. You are not going to break the rule of the show. So I'm going to do it for you. There is a part of your book that I love where you talk about how you made it through the first few episodes of your Mixergy podcast. You almost quit after episode 1. Could you share that story with us? And this is on me. I'll be donating to Junior Achievement for this one, so you're in the clear here.
I don't remember the specific time you're thinking of.
It was episode number 8. Excuse me.
What was happening? I forget it. It's been a while.
Let's find it.
I'll tell you the time that I remember while you're looking. For me, we decided we were going to go to Argentina, and I worried that in Argentina I would not be able to record. People told me the internet was slow. They told me the infrastructure is hard to count on, and all that stuff in some ways was true, though the internet in their professional area was faster than San Francisco internet. So what I did was I booked an interview for the first, I think, Monday after we arrived, knowing that I would then have to find office space, have to find infrastructure, have to find a way to do it. And there was a person who I liked who was counting on me being there, and I wanted to make sure I lived up to it. And I said, worst case, I'm going to call into one of these free conference calling services that will record, and we're going to turn that into a first episode. And that became one of the key parts of what I I was able to do in Argentina. I had to first get started with an infrastructure, and the pressure of knowing there's a schedule, there's a person waiting for me, got me to do it.
Yeah. So this is a theme in your entire Mixergy career. I found the story.
Yeah.
Episode number 8. Do you remember yet who it was? Bill Reichert, founder of Garage Technologies.
Oh, okay. And it was bad. I remember that I did not like that interview. I really expected him to be an amazing person.
I've gone back and listened to this since, by the way. It wasn't that bad. It was not that bad.
Okay.
But
It's
from your
possible
perspective,
that I exaggerated it in my mind.
Well, that always happens, you know. It's like hearing yourself on a recording. You're used to it, I'm sure, at this point. But for most of us, it sounds terrible listening to. But like you were ready to give up after this episode. From your perspective, you didn't have, you know, you weren't well prepared. You were stumbling. You were bumbling. Bill wasn't having a good time, it seemed. How did you keep going after that? Because that was episode 8 of like over 2,200 now. So something had to keep you going.
There's almost always someone scheduled. And it helps that you could look and see that there's someone who's going to be scheduled to do an interview. And if you know there's someone there, if you know there's an obligation outside of yourself, you're going to find a way to do it. And you're going to feel a sense of needing to do it. In fact, we're going to go away and take a long time off as a family. And I'm looking here and I see the founder of Hip Camp is scheduled to be here when I get back. And I might not at the end of this whole trip not feel like sitting down and doing interviews, but she's on there and I like her and I'm really curious about Hip Camp as a business. And so I'll get in and I'll do the interview and it'll get done. And that's, I think, a big part of what works for me.
Yeah, there's from running to homesteading to interviewing, there's always that outside accountability, it seems, that you leverage from Focus
One thing
Mate.
that you asked me about before we got started is, can we talk about, and you gave me a list of things, and you said, you drew a conclusion from it about how I like to learn things or something like that. And I have to say, up until this point, up until maybe a year or two ago, I was the person who just wanted to do one thing and only do one thing really well. I was not the kind of person who would want to try homesteading one day and then try playing the guitar. I've got the guitar behind me, and try doing a couple of other things that I've been doing that are new. And something happened to me where I think I might have burned out a few years ago. And I happened to have left San Francisco at the time, which forced me to see the world in a different way. I mean, literally everything I saw was different. And I happened to have been in a place where they had a guitar, and so I tried an app that taught me that. I happened to be more open to these types of things. And for the first time in my life, I enjoy trying things that I'm new at and not trying to just do another 1% improvement on what I already know. And it's been really interesting. Truthfully, I haven't seen the thing that connects it back to the main things that I care about. It's just been almost like a vacation for my mind. I was just talking with the founder of Remax, the real estate brokerage company, Dave Liniger, and he said, "Look, I still own this business. I own a big chunk of the business." And he said, "But I also own these other things." And he talked about a golf course that he owned, and he talked about a sandwich shop that he owned, and all this other stuff. He goes, "I do all those things." And he said, "That's what keeps my life really interesting. I've never been the kind of person to do what he's doing, but I now start to understand it. And I understand how he can bring some of his knowledge from franchising the real estate brokerage business over to franchising this sandwich company that he has. I can understand how efficiencies and ways of doing things in hospitality in the sandwich business might inform how he does Remax, and then the combination of all those and what he does in another business might help all of it out. Or maybe there's just something that becomes a vacation for him and it's a different experience. And I get that now, and I'm allowing that in my life now, where in the past I wouldn't.
So I imagine is it tough to turn off the part of your brain that just wants to outlast everyone else in whatever endeavor you're taking?
No, I don't turn it off. I keep it there. The challenge for me is that I suck so bad at these things. They're so different the guitar is so different. It's not like I don't love music. I listen to music all the time, but getting my fingers in the right place is so hard. I wanted to learn to play music. Instead, I'm learning agility of my fingers, which is not what I wanted. And then how do you sing while you're strumming at the same time, doing two different things at once? And nothing else in my life is really allowing me to get better at this. It's not like there's some overlap between podcast interviews and playing the guitar. And so that's been incredibly challenging. And I have to say to myself, if you keep at this and you keep going, you will get good at it. But I also wonder, for what? What is the upside? If it was for running, the upside was I'll get healthier. And this is my one thing to do that. Here, it's what? I'll get to be more musical. And the only thing keeping me going is my addiction to keeping going. And so I'm going to keep on going at it with the idea that I will not take on any more things. I probably should cut back some of these new interests, but no more, and then see how good I could get at the things that I'm doing. So how good can I get at working our property here? How good can I get at... I learned plumbing, a little bit of plumbing. I never used to. We used to call and have somebody the next day, if not within an hour, come and fix a toilet. And now, I put in water for the chickens, and I wanted it to be automatic water so that I wouldn't have to ever stress having water. And then it had a leak, and then the whole thing just... and I fixed it. And it feels like an interesting new experience. As long as I don't take on any more things for a bit, I think I should be okay. And hopefully there'll be some overlap. Maybe not. Who knows?
I'll be really curious to hear what you learned from, especially guitar, or what you take away from the whole experience. Now, do you have an outside accountability factor when it comes to playing guitar?
Yes.
Do you have weekly jam sessions or something? I probably should
sign myself up to perform somewhere. That might help.
Oh, man.
I just don't know where, but maybe I should. My friend Neville Medora, the copywriter, said look for a place to do that, especially here in Austin. I should be able to find it.
Mike.
That's actually a really good idea. I should do that. What I do is I signed up for a tutor. I've discovered that for just about everything, you can find an online tutor. And if you've scheduled an appointment with the tutor and you paid for the tutor, it's hard not to come in prepared. And if you're not prepared, at least you have half hour of the tutoring session where you could improve. So you make a half hour improvement every week. I did that when I wanted to get better at chess. That was really helpful. We analyzed my games and I got better. I did that when I wanted to do interviews. That tutoring thing is really good. I think it's an underappreciated aspect of the internet that you can go out and find a tutor really inexpensively for just about anything. And the tutors don't have to be miles ahead of you. They just need to be there as accountability buddies. And if they're a little bit ahead, so much the better. And so I do try to find tutors for different services. And if I can't find them through a service, like I'm using, I forget what the tutoring company that I use is. It was bought by Microsoft, which is kind of weird.
Whoa.
But if not, I go to Fiverr and
Linda?
You can find, I'm sorry?
Linda?
No, it's called Tutor. No, that one, Linda was bought by LinkedIn. Tutor was bought by, let me find where it is, Tutor.
Well, yeah, as you look that up, actually, do you still play chess?
I do. I don't play it nearly as well now because I'm playing it to relax, not to get better. Gotcha.
That might be a good comp. What did you take away from it must have been a couple of years, right?
Chess was intentional. It was the benefit of chess was I'm very good at shooting from the hip and just going for it and figuring it out. And what I realized was where most people don't just do it, I could and then improve and improve as I do it. I needed to build the muscle of stopping and thinking ahead of time. And chess, especially when I was doing long chess games, I'm not good at the short chess games and that's not where I was training. That did force me to think through. That did force me to say, how do I see 4 moves ahead? And if I don't, then I'll get trapped by the player in a way that I should have noticed. What if I do this? What could they do? How could I come back? What would they do? How could I come back? If you do it a little bit, you start to develop that muscle, and that helped me. And I needed to think that through. Like if you think about, for example, fixing this whole chicken thing, in the past I would have just gone to Home Depot and picked up a bunch of stuff.
Wait, sorry, fixing a chicken thing?
Yeah, the chicken leak. We had these chickens and I put automatic water, and fixing that, I would have in the past just said, all right, I'll go figure it out. I have to think ahead. I have to say, why is it leaking? What would I need to buy? I can't just keep running back and forth between Home Depot and here. And chess allowed me to stop and not say, okay, let me just figure it out by starting, but say, I could figure it out by starting, but how about if I take a moment and think ahead? If I do this, what could possibly go wrong? Oh yeah, I might try to fix it and then realize that I need a washer. What else could I need? What's that stupid tape what's that tape, that white tape that you need? I don't know, but I've seen a lot of plumbers use that. Couldn't cost much, 98 cents. Let's just buy one of those just in case, or at least see what that does before I roll up my sleeves and start to fix it. And so the benefit of chess was really clear. It forced me to stop and think instead of just do. And I got a lot of praise in my life for being the person who could just do. Just went out for a run without having running shoes. I'm out here without work boots, just going out and doing. I do need to learn to think and plan a little bit ahead.
Were there any specific exercises or like thought patterns that you've learned through that process to help you think 3 to 4 moves ahead? Because I've always been fascinated in that. Everybody knows the concept of like thinking 3 moves ahead, but I don't think anyone's most people are not very clear on how to do that specifically.
Chess, there are certain things in life that force you to do that. Chess is one of those things that makes you do that. And chess, specifically on chess.com, has a follow-up process where you can have your game analyzed, and if it tells you that you made a bad move, it's a definitively bad move. It's not subjective like a friend sitting down going, that doesn't look good. It's a definitively bad move, and they will show you the moves that would follow if you played a smart person, and you see it enough that you think, I should have known that. Why didn't I see that? And the first step is you put a piece down, and immediately the player that you're playing against will take it. And you should have seen that. If I put this down, what threatens it? And then the next step is a little bit harder to come through on, but it's very definitive. It's very clear. You make a mistake. What is the thing?
Interesting. I learned something recently. Just last year, I was reading a book called Not Thinking Fast and Slow, Power of Habits, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it was all about developing mental models. And I started using this while I played Ultimate Frisbee too. Instead of just like watching what was happening, or if I'm on the field, instead of just like doing what I think is next, try to start predicting what's about to happen. Okay, like really look, where are the people on the field? In your case, it might be, okay, where are the moves on the board? Or in the case of the whole chicken leak, okay, like what is happening? What is leaking? And then you start asking why, and then you start to predict what could happen. And that is a whole like learning process as well, because half the time or more you're wrong about your prediction, but because you try to make a prediction, then you saw the difference in the reality versus your expectation. And then for me anyway, it started to help me think a couple moves ahead on the field because I was starting to predict what I think could happen.
I think in the startup world, there's a phrase about having a bias to action, and we praise people who do, and truthfully, people who just act do tend to be successful, much more so than people who overthink things. But I don't think we respect enough the stop and think a little bit. I remember I did a business plan for my first company, and a lot of what was in the business plan didn't happen, but the discipline of thinking through, where's the revenue coming from? How much money can we expect? How many members do we need? The numbers didn't pan out the way I expected them, but the thought process behind it was still helpful for adjusting when they didn't pan out and for knowing what I was looking for. I think that helps. So chess gave me that. I don't know what guitar will give me. I don't even know if it'll give me anything.
And you know what? Worst comes to worst, you have a way to entertain yourself.
Myself and friends,
and maybe it leads to something else. I listened to this creative podcast with Andy J. Pizza. That's his real name. And he was talking about how to develop your own voice. And he said step number 1 is to do things for yourself and stop thinking about your audience. So just do something that interests you and see where it goes. It might lead to something, it might lead to nothing, but it almost always is a net positive in the end. It might lead you to that next thing or that next thing that gets you to where you want to go.
I'm a big believer in that too.
That's really cool. Well, I have a lot to think about, to be honest. This has been fascinating. Yep. I think finding people to join you on your journey is such a big takeaway. I'm actively looking for that in my business as well, and I'm going to do that for this podcast too. I'm already lining up the next few episodes. Not that I think this one went horrible, but I'm planning to planning to keep going and see where the podcast goes. This has been great, Andrew. Thanks for the time. Where can people find you on the internet? And we'll give you one more book plug. Where can people buy Stop Asking Questions?
Social, I'm on Twitter the most, though I go back and forth with that. It's at Andrew Warner on most platforms. And of course, my podcast is Mixergy, Mixergy. And I should say, as long as I'm giving people links, the lesson site, it's called Take Lessons, and it's pretty inexpensive. But, if you just go to Fiverr or other sites, you can get a really good tutor for just about it.
Andrew, thank you so much. This was so much fun. You can follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Warner and listen to his podcast at Mixergy, Mixergy.com. You can also find it on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get podcasts. Also pick up his book, Stop Asking Questions, if you want to learn how to lead high-impact conversations. You can find that on Amazon or anywhere else you get your books. I also just donated $20 to Junior Achievement because Andrew did not plug his book once. In fact, I plugged his book, so I owed $20 to JA. If you want to learn more about the organization, go to jausa.ja.org and learn how to get involved or donate to your local chapter of Junior Achievement. All right, that's it. This was great. Talk to you soon. Peace out.